We don't always know when a story is about to harden into something permanent. Sometimes it happens in a quiet room, after the flowers are already wilting, when everyone thinks the worst part is over. That was the case for Margot Caldwell, whose grief was still settling when it was quietly redirected. This is how she remembers it. I was standing beside my mother in the law office when the attorney cleared his throat and stopped shuffling papers. "There appears to be an issue," he said. "Mr. Caldwell's formal will cannot be located." The room went still. My chest tightened, not from panic, but from the way Robert's hand rested a little too comfortably on the back of my mother's chair. "So, what happens now?" Robert asked. His voice was calm. "Practiced. Under the circumstances," the attorney replied. "Temporary authority passes to the surviving spouse." Robert nodded once, as if this had been agreed upon earlier. He leaned closer to me, close enough that only I could hear him. "You were taken in out of kindness," he said. "Don't confuse that with entitlement." Across the room, Evan smiled without looking at me. "Guess that settles it," he said. "We can finally move forward." I wanted to speak. I felt the words lining up, but my mother's fingers tightened around mine, a silent plea. We noticed then how quickly a room can decide who belongs. We didn't say anything. We watched. I stepped outside a few minutes later, pulled my coat tighter, and breathed in the cold. Providence felt smaller than it had that morning. If you're listening along, stay with us. Some moments don't reveal their weight until later. By the following Monday, my access badge stopped working. I stood in the lobby of Caldwell Restoration Group, swiping it twice before the security guard glanced over. "Sorry," he said, lowering his voice. "System update." I nodded like that explained everything. Upstairs, the office felt rearranged without looking different. My name was gone from the project board. Evan's was written in marker, bold and confident. "Temporary," Robert said later in the conference room, folding his hands. "It's cleaner if we limit confusion." Confusion for who? The words slipped out before I could stop them. He didn't look up. For the people who actually need to make decisions. Evan leaned back in his chair. "Don't take it personally. Margot, this stuff gets complicated." My mother sat beside him, eyes fixed on her notes. She didn't speak. We could feel how fast the air changed when no one challenges the new order. I packed a box that afternoon. Not much. A mug, a notebook, the spare charger I always forgot to take home. At the elevator, Evan offered a quick smile. "We'll catch up later." I watched the doors close between us and understood something then. I hadn't been pushed out. I'd been quietly replaced. That night, Robert called me into the kitchen after dinner. The plates were still on the counter. My mother was rinsing a glass. Her back turned. "This doesn't need to get messy," he began, smoothing the crease in his sleeve. "You walk away. We all keep our lives." I crossed my arms. "My life is already gone." He let out a small breath, almost patient. "You push this. Vivian gets dragged through hearings, depositions, her name in public records." He glanced at her. "I don't think you want that for her." My mother froze. The water kept running. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not fear. Something heavier. So this was the leverage. We noticed how the room went quiet in a way that wasn't peaceful. Vivian finally turned around. "Margot, please," she whispered, "just for now." I nodded, because that was easier than arguing. I went upstairs, closed my door, sat on the edge of the bed. Henry's voice came back to me, steady as ever. Silence always costs more than you think. I stayed there a long time, staring at the floor, realizing he'd been warning me all along. 3 nights later, someone knocked on my door just after midnight. I didn't answer right away. I stood there listening, barefoot on the cold floor. The knock came again, softer this time. When I opened it, my mother was standing in the hallway with her coat still on. Her hair was damp. She looked smaller somehow. "I couldn't stay," she said. "Not tonight." I stepped aside. She walked in and sat at the table without taking her coat off. Her hands shook as she set her purse down. "There's something your grandfather gave me," she said. "A long time ago." She pulled out an envelope. Thick, sealed, untouched. She didn't slide it across. She held it like it might bite. "He told me to keep it safe. He said if anything happened, if things went wrong, you'd need this." My throat closed. "Why now?" Her eyes filled. "Because Robert thinks you're finished." We could feel how long she'd been carrying that sentence alone. She placed the envelope in front of me and pressed her palm flat over it. He never trusted Robert with the truth. I didn't open it yet. I just nodded. After she left, the apartment went quiet in a way that felt heavy. I sat at the table for a long time with the envelope in front of me. The seal was old, the edges soft from being handled and put away again. I finally broke it and slid the papers out, one at a time. The first page was a letter in Henry's handwriting. "Margot," it began. "If you're reading this, then the easy way failed." I read that line twice. The next pages were records. Guardianship, adoption, dates from years ago, signed and notarized. Proof that I hadn't been taken in out of pity. I'd been placed, chosen. My hands started to shake when I reached the trust memorandum. It wasn't flashy, just clear. Henry's intent spelled out in plain language: control, stewardship, responsibility. I pressed my palm to the table and felt my breath go shallow. He wanted you protected. My mother had said earlier. He wanted you prepared. We noticed how silence can feel different when it's finally honest. At the bottom of the envelope was another note, shorter this time. "Blood matters less than courage. If you're standing alone, you're standing in the right place." I folded the papers back into the envelope and held it against my chest. Not like evidence, like something handed back to me after being gone a long time. Robert hosted the dinner at the house like nothing had shifted. Candles, linen napkins. His version of normal. Evan stood near the fireplace with a glass in hand, already loosening his tie. "Big night," he said when he saw me. "Dad's making it official." Official meant loud enough for everyone else to hear. When Robert tapped his glass, the room leaned toward him. "I want to thank you all for coming," he began. "With the company moving forward, Evan will be stepping into a leadership role." Polite applause followed. Evan smiled like he'd practiced it. My mother didn't clap. She kept her hands folded in her lap. Robert's eyes found mine across the table. "This is about stability," he added. "About keeping things in the right hands." I felt the envelope in my bag press against my side. I didn't touch it. We could tell this was the kind of moment where silence was doing more work than shouting ever could. Later, near the kitchen, Robert lowered his voice. "I assume you understand why this is best." I met his gaze. "I understand why you want it." He nodded once. Satisfied. "Good." Evan brushed past me on his way out. "No hard feelings," he offered. "Quick and easy. Families survive this stuff." I watched him go, then stepped outside into the cold. My breath came out sharp. I didn't pull out the papers. I didn't confront anyone. Not yet. Instead, I made a decision I hadn't planned on making when the night started. I was done waiting for permission. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Nathan Price met me in a quiet office above a coffee shop. He skimmed the papers without rushing, tapping the edge of the folder once or twice. "This shows intent," he said. "Strong intent." He looked up. "But intent isn't execution, so the will mattered," I said. He nodded. "If there was a later will and it vanished, that changes everything." A few days later, he called and asked me to come back. "I found someone," he said. "She's nervous." Helen Ward sat across from me with her purse on her lap, knuckles white. "I saw it," she murmured. "Henry signed a full will. It went into the private safe." Her voice dropped. "After his stroke, Robert came by alone. The next morning, it was gone." My stomach tightened. "Why didn't you say anything?" She shook her head. "People like him don't misplace things by accident. We could hear how carefully she chose each word. That night, a black vehicle idled across the street from my apartment. It stayed there through dinner, through the news, through the sink filling with dishes. My phone buzzed, a blocked number. Walk away. The message read, "This doesn't end the way you think." I turned off the light and sat in the dark, the envelope heavy in my hands. I didn't delete the message. I forwarded it to Nathan instead. The courtroom smelled like old paper and coffee. I sat beside Nathan with my hands folded, the envelope tucked inside my bag like it could still disappear. Robert arrived late. He didn't look at me. Evan did, once, then looked away. Nathan stood first. "We're alleging will concealment and breach of fiduciary duty." His voice stayed even. "There are transactions that coincide with the disappearance of the will." Robert's lawyer frowned. "Speculation." Nathan slid the records forward. 2 withdrawals. $85,000. $140,000. Both within days of Mr. Caldwell's stroke. Robert finally turned. Those were business expenses. For what project, the judge asked. Silence stretched. Robert adjusted his cuff. Helen Ward took the stand next. Her hands shook as she spoke. "I saw the will. It was signed. It went into the safe." She swallowed. After Robert visited, it was gone. We could feel the air tighten when the truth stopped sounding hypothetical. Robert stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. She's confused." The judge raised a hand. "Sit down." Then my mother's name was called. Vivian walked slowly, eyes fixed ahead. She paused before speaking. "Henry told me Margot was the steward. Not Robert, not Evan." Her voice cracked. "He asked me to protect her." Robert's face went still. "You're choosing her over your own husband." Vivian didn't look at him. "I'm choosing the truth." The judge leaned back, pen resting against her fingers. "Based on the evidence presented, the court orders a criminal investigation and removes temporary authority." I exhaled for the first time that morning. Robert stared at the table. Evan stared at the floor. I kept my eyes forward, heart pounding, knowing this wasn't the end, but it wasn't silence anymore. The weeks after the hearing moved slowly. Paperwork, meetings, long pauses where nothing seemed to happen. Robert resigned before the investigation finished. He left a note on the kitchen counter for my mother. One line, "I never thought you'd choose her." She folded it once and put it in a drawer. Evan showed up at my office late one afternoon. No suit, no smile. He stood in the doorway like he wasn't sure he was allowed inside. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now," he said. Everything I had was built on him. I looked at the empty chair across from my desk. "If you want to stay, you start at the bottom. No shortcuts." He nodded, relief and shame crossing his face at the same time. "I can do that." We could sense how different that room felt once no one was pretending anymore. The company didn't celebrate when the court recognized me as steward. There were no speeches, just quieter days. I sold off one division, kept the crews Henry trusted, and let the rest go with fair notice. One evening, I unlocked the old workshop behind the main building. Dust hung in the air. Blueprints were stacked where Henry left them. I ran my fingers over the work table and heard his voice again. "Build something that lasts, even if it's slower." Outside, my phone buzzed. A message from the channel account letting me know people were still listening, still staying with the story. I shut the lights off, locked the door, and stood there for a moment in the quiet. For the first time in a long while, the ground under my feet felt solid. Not because I'd won, because I hadn't disappeared. I moved out of the house a month later. Not in a rush, just quietly, a few boxes at a time. My mother stood in the doorway while I carried the last one to the car. "You don't have to go far," she said. "I know," I told her. "I just need a place that's mine." She nodded, understanding more than she used to. Work settled into a rhythm, meetings that ended on time, decisions made without someone hovering. Evan kept his head down and learned fast. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. One evening, I stayed late at the workshop again. The building creaked the way it always had. I locked up, then unlocked it once more and stepped back inside, just to stand there. Henry used to do that. Double-check the doors. Walk the floor one last time. I smiled at the thought. On my desk sat the envelope. I hadn't opened it in weeks. I didn't need to anymore. It wasn't proof now. It was history. I realized something standing there, alone in the quiet. I hadn't fought to take anything from anyone. I'd fought to stop being reduced, to stop being told I was temporary, borrowed, lucky. What changed wasn't the company, or the money, or the title they finally put on paper. What changed was how I moved through my own life. I didn't flinch when my phone rang anymore. I didn't rehearse conversations in my head. I trusted my own voice. Margot Caldwell wasn't the person who stayed silent to keep the peace. She was the one who stayed. I turned off the lights, locked the door for the last time that night, and walked to my car without looking back. We stayed with her there, in that pause. If you're still here too, you know why stories like this linger.